Hi and welcome back to the course. In this video we're going to look at what exactly is Heroku and how it works. Heroku, as I've mentioned, is a web service that runs your code and allows other people to see it. So you can give it your Flask applications and it can run your Flask apps, and it makes them available for others to interact with. When you run the Flask app in your computer, other people can't access it, log in and make requests. However, when you run them on Heroku, other people can do that because Heroku gives them a URL and address that others can access. And generally, allowing that, giving other people a URL that they can access, is called hosting, essentially. So you can host, for example, WordPress sites, you can host Flask apps, you can host static websites, etc. Heroku can be used to host Flask applications. It can also be used to host many other things. So you're not limited to just that. It can host Ruby apps, it can host Go apps, etc. Heroku works with dynos, and this is here a picture of a dyno. And what a dyno is very similar to a server. A server is something that you can put your code on and then run your code and make it available for other people. And a dyno does exactly the same thing. A dyno is Heroku's version of a server. However, it's not quite a computer. It is something called a virtual machine. So when you run your application doesn't have control of the computer in which it is running. It only has control of the virtual system that has been created specifically for that dyno. Now that means that there are a couple of limitations in terms of what we can do. And also, because when we use a dyno, we tell Heroku what Flask application to run, and then it does that, we're limited also in running other things simultaneously. For example, something we might be interested in running simultaneously alongside our Flask app is a way of improving performance of our app by adding a caching layer. We cannot do that in Heroku, for example. However, what we can do is we can tell Heroku to run our Python app, and also we will have to tell it to run something called UWSGI. UWSGI is a way of serving your Flask application. Although the Flask application has a serving layer, that's how we access it using Postman or our web server, it's not the best, and also it is limited in what it can interact with. By running UWSGI, which is another Python library, on top, we're going to make our Flask app a lot more flexible. We're going to look at exactly what that means and how to do all this in the coming videos. Okay, so this is what our dyno is going to run. It's going to run the Python app, the Flask app, which includes Flask, RESTful, and Flask SQL Alchemy, and so on. And it's also going to run UWSGI. The UWSGI app or library is going to interact with our Flask app in order to make it available for others to use. So our Heroku app is going to look essentially like this. We're going to have a big box, which is our Heroku app, and that is going to be composed of a single dyno. The Heroku app, in addition, can also have other things such as configuration properties. For example, we can configure what database we want to use. We can use SQLite, we can also use Postgres or MySQL. We can also configure things like where the logs appear. Whenever our application crashes, we can put some logging, some printing out to the console somewhere. We can decide where that is. We can do things like setting up a bunch of other configuration parameters. And in addition, the Heroku apps are not limited to just running a single dyno, but they can also run many other dynos at the same time. As you can see, all of these dynos run exactly the same code, and that means that, for example, as an example, each dyno can deal with one user. If we run 6 dynos, we can deal with 6 users simultaneously. This is a bit of an oversimplification, don't worry. Each dyno can deal with many users. But of course, if you have 6, that's 6 times more users you can deal with, more or less. All of these dynos can interact with the same database, so data can be shared between them, and overall, this increased number of dynos would just make your app go faster and be more available. However, you will have to pay if you want to increase the number of dynos. So that's a limitation there. Also, Heroku is great for security because Heroku enables secure sockets layer for us, so we don't have to do anything. SSL is automatically enabled, and what SSL does is it allows the communication between yourself, the client, and the server, which is Heroku, to be encrypted. So all of your users, all of your REST API users, are going to see encrypted communication going to the server, which is great, for example, when we're sending passwords and things like that. That's just so nobody else can snoop on that information and read it if it is encrypted. So as a conclusion, Heroku is a distributed hosting service, which means each dyno is separate from the others, and each server is called a dyno and it runs your application. And also, the free tier gives you one dyno, which is what I mentioned earlier, but you have limited running hours, so you cannot run the dyno continuously. It goes to sleep every now and then it takes a few seconds to start up again. So we'll look into exactly what that means in the next few videos. And also, it's got a good security profile due to SSL being enabled by default. So that's it for this video. A quick intro to what Heroku is and how it's going to run, and now we're going to work on deploying our app to Heroku. I'll see you on the next video.